Okay, and then I'm going to share my screen. And when I share my screen, if you can't hear me, please somebody unmute themselves and let me know. All right. So, like I said, we are going to be talking about our annual review process here at STARS. So, what is annual review? Some of you might have never heard of this terminology before, so I'm going to try to explain it to the best of my ability. Annual review refers to the process of reviewing each child's individual education plan once a year. So, most all of you that are on tonight have a child that is in program with us and your child came to us with their own individualized education plan. So that plan was created by the school district and STARS adopted it. And so the annual review really is the process of reviewing this plan once a year. The annual review meeting will be conducted by the child's school district, in which a representative on the child's team at STARS will attend, in addition to parents, guardians, your district chair, and most likely a county representative. So during this once a year review and process, the district and the state want to make sure that all representative parties are there to really be able to capture the child as a whole. So what happens at this meeting? First and foremost, introductions are made. So typically it starts with the introductions from the district team. So this little phrase right here, CPSE, refers to Committee on Preschool Special Education. So because your kids are 3 to 5 years old, they are considered preschoolers, and they are preschoolers, that receive special education. Therefore, they are kind of under that umbrella term, a CPSC. So that is the committee. That is your school district, your home school district, who really houses your child's IEP. That committee will really be the ones that are chairing and running these meetings. So most likely it will always be your district chair. So that's kind of the head person that sits on that committee for special ed. Sometimes there'll be a representative maybe from the school age team if your child is transitioning to kindergarten. Sometimes there'll be a representative on the eval team if your child was due for an updated eval. Maybe there's a representative from the eval team, maybe a representative from the psych team. So usually it is the district chair and then some representatives from the district team. It's always the parents or guardian. And it's the STARS team. So typically STARS we kind of refer to it as like the hierarchy. So that would be special education teacher. If the special education teacher wasn't available or present, it then falls to speech, and then OT, and then PT, and then music. So that's kind of the hierarchy. Sometimes there's two representatives. Let's say there was a change that was being requested from one of your child's providers. That provider most likely is going to attend the meeting. That way they can advocate and justify and explain that change. So that is very typical. So introductions happen. The CPSC chair really allows time for the parents to express how their child is doing, any concerns they might have, any progress that they might have seen. Some of these kiddos are first-time, preschool students with STARS, or first-time preschool students altogether. So it's really fun to have the chance to come together in this type of a fashion and really talk about the changes that we have seen in our kids, over the past, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 months. And for some families, this is the second or third annual review meeting with the school district. So it is incredible to really talk about the progress and or the area of need that is still there on these meetings. So, this next section is really a chance for you guys to really talk about your kids. From there, we will get into what we call the annual review document. So I'm going to talk about it on some, the next slides, but this next section is really where the STARS team representative gives an update using this extensive document regarding progress in each developmental domain. So when I say developmental domain, I'm referring to, that special ed portion. So that's the cognitive and the social. If your child receives speech, next would be that speech and language, that communication lens. If your child receives OT, it will be like that fine and motor and sensory processing. If they receive PT, it'll be that gross motor. And I'll kind of get into, if your child doesn't receive all of those services, who's really responsible for kind of touching on those domains in the report. After that, the parents are really going to have the opportunity to ask any questions. Probably 9 out of 10 times, the report is not going to come as a surprise. You are going to have opportunity to have plenty of conversations with your child's team about this report prior to this meeting. So a lot of this stuff will be, familiar to you. The team then will discuss the upcoming school year and address any anticipated needs, and the district will determine continued eligibility. So in terminology, educational terminology, we kind of refer to our kiddos as our 3 go 4s. So those are our kiddos that are going to come back to us again if they remain eligible. And then our 4 go 5s, which are our kindergarten bound kiddos that will go on to school age again if they are deemed eligible. So at the end of the day, it's always the district's decision regarding eligibility. What the STARS team is going to do is we're going to give them all of this information regarding your child and where they are functioning, within close to age appropriate within all of these developmental domains. And then the district is going to take all this information and say, okay, based on these reports, based on these assessments, based on these levels of delay, this child continues to qualify, or this child really doesn't qualify for a special education program. We're going to look at, this route for kindergarten or this route for next year. So all of those things will be discussed at that meeting. And then the last section is new goals. So some of our kiddos are actually getting ready our teachers are writing reports because we already have meetings that are going to be coming up at the end of January, which is soon for annual review. So then what's going to happen is these teams are going to generate some new goals for the 26-27 school year. So to clarify, to be really clear, the goals on the current IEP will stay in effect for the rest of the school year. These new goals that they're writing will then take effect the following school year, as long as the child again continues to qualify. Okay, so when you're probably all like, oh my gosh, well, when is my kid's meeting? This is up to your child's school district or your school district. So districts control the dates and times for annual review meetings. What happens is, like I said, annual review meetings take place once a year. Sometimes, in some cases, the annual review is a separate meeting from the school age meeting if your child is transitioning to kindergarten. So sometimes those can look like actually 2 different meetings, but the actual annual review process takes place once a year. If your child, again, will be going to kindergarten and still remains eligible, they will sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes have an additional CSC, which refers to School Age Committee on Special Education meeting. So districts control the meetings, the dates and the times. They will alert STARS of the dates as they come in. So we have one of our wonderful site managers, Abby, kind of organizes our annual review process over here at STARS. So she has this very, very large master grid of all the school districts we contract with, which is a lot. It's well over a dozen, probably closer to 2 dozen. And as the annual review meetings come in, so I'll give you an example. Let's say, Henry is a RCSD 3 go 4. So he's an RCSD kiddo who's going to potentially come back to us. RCSD is going to send Abby an alert and say, hey, Henry's meeting is coming up on February 2nd. Here is the notification for it. Please let us know who to invite to the meeting. And then what Abby does is, as these start coming in, she organizes them and then sends those alerts and reminders off to that child's team so they can be prepared with the report. At the same time, the school district is responsible for notifying the family. So as we're getting the information and notifying the teams to be ready with the reports, the school district is responsible for notifying families. So typically this happens the old-fashioned way with a letter home, at least 5 business days before the annual review takes place. They really do this because we know that not every single meeting that they might give you with a specific date and time is going to work in your schedule. So you do have the option, if you get a meeting date that does not work, to reschedule that meeting. That is your right as a parent. So typically the notification about when your child's AR will come from the school district. We will, however, as we get closer to that annual review, reach out to you just to talk about the report and give you a reminder of when the annual review meeting is. And since COVID, about 95% of annual review meetings take place via Zoom. So again, this link comes from the school district. If a parent happens to request it, which is fewer times nowadays, but it absolutely can be a request, the meeting could take place in person at the school district office. Okay, so let's talk about the actual annual review template. So this is a template that we have created and modified over the years, and it is a pretty comprehensive document. It can be very overwhelming, and we've really tried to encourage our staff to make it very user-friendly. So making sure that we have language in there that is, easy to be interpreted by anybody who's reading the report. But it tends to be, when you get it, 9 or 10 pages long. It is a lot. It covers your child's entire program here at STARS. So the first page really is the demographic information. So this is pretty much, what you see is what it is. It will mimic typically what you see at the top of your child's IEP right now. It'll have the name of the child, date of birth, chronological age, what their school district is, the ID. One of the biggest ones here that you might be confused about or wondering is date of assessment. So some school districts will have, in terms of the way they want their kids to be assessed, will be what we refer to as standardized assessment. Okay, so when we're thinking about goals, so let's say special education, and we have a cognitive goal with objectives, and the school district is saying to us, okay, we want you to assess that goal in a standardized fashion, meaning we have to use a standardized assessment. So for special ed, that would be something like what we call the DAISY or the PKBS. It's typically, mimics some sort of a checklist, but where we're actually, formally assessing your children. Other school districts will not have standardized assessment. They'll have some type of informal assessment, and it really will be mostly, teacher report, professional judgment, data collection, and what we use is an informal checklist, which is called the HELP checklist. So either way your child is getting assessed, it's really just determined by the district if that's going to be in a standardized fashion or in a, more of an informal fashion. So that's kind of what the date of assessment means. Date of report is when the report was written. Diagnoses and special alerts typically are any sort of formal diagnoses, autism, hyperkinesis, Down syndrome, any diagnoses, that would fall under that category. Special alerts might be something like peanut allergy or, cystic fibrosis, WARES, AFOs, something that is a special alert that the district and us as a programmer really should have highlighted in this section. And then we really outline the team for you. So under the discipline, like I said, it'll be the hierarchy. It'll really go from special education teacher all the way down and who that provider is. And then exactly like what I just spoke about, the basis of assessment. So every discipline will add how they assessed the child. Again, this can either be formally, so the standardized, or informally, which is the observation, and really is based on the child's IEP. Okay, so if you joined me a couple of months ago, we kind of talked about this in the IEP section called the academic achievement, functional performance, and learning characteristics. So this section is the bulk of the report. It really follows the present levels of performance on the IEP. So if you have your child's IEP close by, or after this meeting, you're like, oh, I want to take a peek at my child's IEP, you will see present levels of performance, and that really is the meat and potatoes of the report. This section will be filled out by each child's therapist. If a child does not receive a service, the special education will comment on that specific domain. So, for example, so-and-so does not receive physical therapy. So the classroom teacher will comment on the child's gross motor skills in that specific section, okay? If the child does receive PT, the physical therapist will be filling out this section. So this section is very data-driven. Each discipline will provide specific data to really show the present levels of performance, okay? So a lot of this language starts out, I'm gonna give you an example for special ed. So again, we talked about that cognitive domain. So when we think about, when we talk about cognition, we think about, that reasoning, the reasoning skills, that the memorization, the pre-academic skills, and so let's say in the beginning of the report, what you're going to probably see again, 9 times out of 10, is a statement that starts out with, Johnny was informally assessed using observation, the health checklist, and a professional judgment. Okay, so this is how Johnny was assessed. And, based off of that assessment, Johnny is currently functioning with and then you're going to see the words severe, moderate, or mild delay within that domain. That's typically the structure of how each domain is going to start their report. They're going to tell you, obviously, who the child they're referring to is, how that child was assessed, and what that present level is in terms of that delay. And then they're really going to get into the bulk of describing the child based off of that domain. So what are we seeing the child do, in terms of their cognitive skills? What are we still not seeing? How do we feel like they learn best? What are their interests? What are their needs? And then really touch on kind of going into the next section. So I was ahead of myself. I just talked about this. So next part of the report starts out with the cognitive section. Again, that hierarchy. So you're going to have your demographics, and then your special ed is going to be right off the bat next. Okay, so that cognition, this is part of the report that is completed by the special education teacher. Like I said, cognitive development really refers to the process of growth and change in the intellectual mental abilities, such as thinking, reasoning, understanding. So some ways that we assess this, look at this, is cause and effect, problem-solving skills, imitation skills, memory skills, comprehension, pre-academic, attention, all of that falls under cognition. And then as you can see over here on the right side, this is a guide for our teachers to really think about some prompts when they're writing their report, okay? So some things that they might think about is, what type of a learner is this student? Is this student a kinesthetic, meaning hands-on learner? Are they a visual learner? Are they an auditory learner? What strategies have been implemented to support them cognitively? What was successful? What types of reinforcement is needed? How does a student best learn within their environment? Okay, do they learn better with, limited visual contrast, right? So we obviously have lots of visual stimuli in our rooms, but are they able to attend to a task when they really are, when it's put on a, black felt board, right? So really, how do they learn best in the current environment? How does the student work best? One-to-one, small group, large group. All of these are really going to be prompts for the special education teacher to fill out this section. And then as you can see at the top, if standardized assessment was required on the IEP, this would be a formal standardized assessment that the teacher might use. It's called the DAISY, the Developmental Assessment of Young Children. And this is where that data would go. So this would be the date that it was administered, the percentile rank, what your child's standard score was, and then how really what that equates to in terms of a level of delay. Excuse my dog. Okay, so next is going to be self-care. The self-care section of the report is filled out by the occupational therapist. Again, if the child does not receive OT, the special education teacher will fill this section out. So self-care skills are the everyday tasks undertaken so children are really ready to participate in life activities. So these are the dressing, the eating, the cleaning teeth, the toileting. They are referred to as the daily living skills. So again, if there's standardized assessment, the occupational therapist will put that in here in terms of what the test results were, and then they will really lead into that narrative. So like I said, they'll lead into, Johnny was formally assessed using this assessment and is presenting with a blank level of delay. Let's talk about Johnny's self-care skills and self-care needs. Okay. Next, again, the hierarchy really is speech and language, but the self-care section does sneak in there before communication. But next is going to come communication. And this really is a big section because there's a lot to talk about when we, think about communication in our children, right? It's not just verbal language. It's not just written language. Communication is so many different things. So this really is a pretty comprehensive area. The communication section is going to be filled out by the speech and language therapist. Again, if the child doesn't qualify for speech therapy, the special education teacher will fill this out. About 95% of the time, if the child is coming to us at STARS, they're qualified, they do have speech therapy on their IEP. So this section would be filled out by a speech therapist. So the communication section is broken down into the following sections. Articulation, so that really is, improve the clarity of speech sounds. Expressive language, so the expressive language is how we are really getting our thoughts and ideas out there. And then the receptive language is really what we're comprehending. In addition, that pragmatic language, so pragmatic language is referred to as social language. The articulation, so that's pronunciation. And the next two categories are only going to be filled out if your child receives these and they are written into their individualized education plan. So these prompt and assistive tech are actually 2 additional services in addition to the speech and language therapy. So these sections, like I said, will only be filled out if your child gets prompt and your child gets assistive tech. So prompt is actually the restructuring of the oral muscular phonetic targets. So this really is a tactile kinesthetic approach. So it's where our prompt therapists use that hands-on approach to really use touching cues to help with articulation, specifically around that jaw, tongue, and lips. So they manually guide the child through those targeted words, phrases, and sentences. And then assistive technology, some of you might be on here and say, oh, my child has assistive tech, or, your speech therapist might be trialing assistive tech. So that, again, refers to items or devices or adaptations that enable a child to communicate. So assistive tech can be low tech, it can be, higher tech. It really is just an additional resource that has been deemed again through an evaluation by our AT specialist to be extremely beneficial in your child's communication. Okay, so after that, the meat and the potatoes kind of comes this really nice bulleted sections of strengths, preferences, and interests. So this section is again pretty standard, and in a lot of the time, it's a really nice section for parents because it is pretty easy to follow. So this section again highlights strengths of the students in the areas of cognition, self-care, and communication. So those first areas that we've covered so far. So again, this could look like identifies people, places, and things, right? That could be a cognitive strength or interest. Matches pictures, colors, and shapes. Uses utensils with minimum support. Dresses self with simple clothing with minimum support. Asks questions 75% of the time. So again, we're giving you some really nice data points of things that we are seeing on a consistent basis. Let's say that Johnny matched a red circle to a red circle 2 times out of 50 trials. We most likely aren't going to put that on there. We might talk about it in the narrative and saying Johnny's beginning to match colors or beginning to match shapes. But we're going to be really specific about that language because we're really looking obviously for that consistency, right? To where it becomes something that might be a preference, interest, or strength. Okay, so then from there, we're going to talk about the academic, developmental, and functional needs. So we go from the strengths and the interests, and then we're really talking about the needs. So that is what this section outlines. And again, all disciplines will fill this out, will fill this section out. So some examples of this might be in terms of the verbiage. We're really looking for Johnny to increase ability to answer yes, no questions through a verbal or gestural response more than 50% of the time. So that's what the need is, right? We have, exposed Johnny to this skill. We have worked on that, and we're still not seeing the consistency. So this is something that might be a need that we want to work on. Another one might be increased ability to drink from an open cup with minimal support 4 to 5 trials. That's a beautiful need, right? We know Johnny can drink from a bottle. Johnny can drink from a cup with a lid and a straw, but while beginning to trial an open cup, Johnny is spilling, 4 out of 5 times. So that is a need, right? That's something that we're going to work towards for Johnny, is to be able to increase the ability to do so. And then right at the bottom on the right-hand side, this is your chance as a parent to give comments and concerns. So what's going to be coming home to you very soon, if not already, is what we refer to as our parent preschool questionnaire. So this is your opportunity to really give us information about what you're seeing across all of those domains at home, and then give us some comments and anything that is going to be informative for us in writing these reports. And then that's really where we put this in. There is, per parent comment, and then really what the statement is in regards to whatever domain we're focusing on. So here it is. Again, I'm ahead of myself. So each child will have a parent questionnaire that gets sent home for families to fill out prior to the annual review. So this is really important. If you see this coming home in your child's backpack, please take the time to fill this out. You guys know your kids the best. And we really, really, really want your input. It's super important. So please take the time to fill this out. This section will then be added to the parent comment section on the annual review, and is really important for the overall summary of the child's progress. Okay, so we've hit on that cognitive, we've hit on the self help skills, we've hit on the communication. Next is going to come social. So that's going to be back to special education teacher. And just like what we talked about for every other section, this could be either a standardized assessment or an informal assessment. And again, all sections of the report require a severity of delay, and the language is most likely going to start off very similar. So when we talk about social development, we're really talking about, right, students' relationships with peers and adults, feelings, emotions, understanding feelings about self, feelings about others, social adjustment to school, social adjustment maybe to community, everything that really would fall under that social domain. Their play skills, all of that, which will fall under that social domain. So again, here are some examples of maybe some prompts that might be helpful for the special education teacher to really look for when they are writing these reports. So again, what are the students' relationships with peers and adults? What's the student's level of play, right? Do they play solitary by themselves? Do they play parallel, which is next to, or do they play cooperatively, which is together? How does the student transition? How do their sensory processing needs really impact the daily routine? What is the student's general behavior within the school environment? Are there behavior strategies? Does this particular child have, a functional behavior analysis? Does the child demonstrate emotions, understanding of emotions, all of that? That's really going to be some of the prompts that the teacher is going to use to fill this section out. And then again, similar again to the other sections, we're going to do strengths, preferences, interests, and then we're going to do academic, developmental, and functional needs. And then parents, you are going to get your time to comment. Okay, so from there, we're going to jump into kind of our OT, PT realm of the report. So physical development, we really start off with fine motor first. So again, the physical development section will be filled out by both the physical therapist and the occupational therapist. Again, if the child does not receive one or both of those services, the special education teacher will fill this section out. So if your child doesn't receive OT and PT, there's definitely not going to be any standardized assessment because there's no goals surrounding these domains. The teacher is really going to go off of their professional judgment and using a developmental checklist and really looking at, where your child's current functional skills are in these domains in comparison to, that age appropriate milestone chart. Okay. So fine motor and sensory will be completed by the occupational therapist, and gross motor will be completed by the physical therapist. So I'm not sure if I have these on the next page. I kind of wanted to explain that quick. Okay, so when I say fine motor, I'm really talking about those small motor movements, okay? And when I say gross motor, I'm talking about those larger motor movements. And when I talk about sensory, I'm talking about all of our senses and how they impact our learning. Okay, so again, standardized testing is only required if stated on the child's IEP. Not every annual review will have a table with testing results. So you might get your report and say, oh my gosh, Emily showed us a mock report and there were all these tables, and you might get a report, your child's report, and there might not be a single table. That's because your child didn't have any standardized assessment. And that's totally okay. Like I said, we are still informally assessing our kids every single day. So they are being assessed in an informal way. It's just not a standardized fashion. Okay, so again, you're going to have your strengths, you're going to have your academic and developmental needs. There is a section in the IEP that we were, I'm sorry, not the IEP, in the annual review that we refer to as the vision and hearing. So this typically is completed by the speech therapist, but if there is no area of concern, the therapist will just simply note within normal limits. Okay, so we're almost to the bottom of this really lengthy report. So thank you for staying with me. The next section, the next two sections actually mirror the IEP pretty straightforward. So we talk about management needs, and then we talk about measurable annual goals. So the management needs are really every annual review report will be required to have this section complete. So this section really includes specific supports that are individualized for your student. So this section might look like a paragraph, or it might look like just bullets, right? So a really good example of this is under the management needs is Johnny consistently uses a box chair at large group and message time. He also has preferred seating on the end of the half circle next to one peer and in close proximity to a teaching assistant. To help anticipate transitions, he also has a personalized first then board. He has access to a timer and is given personal cues. So there you go. Right there is your bullets of what interventions and supports and strategies are very specific to helping Johnny navigate, manage, and be successful in his environment. The next section, in the final section of the annual review, is the measurable annual goals. So each discipline will be responsible for creating annual goals for each student. Some disciplines might combine a goal. So for instance, sometimes speech and special ed might have a combined goal. Other times, special ed and music, if your child receives music therapy, might have a combined goal, because some of those skills and developmentally, those domains tend to overlap. So all goals must be measurable and obtainable for the child. So there must be a way of measuring them. So how are we going to really take the data, or figure out how, if the child is making progress? And they must be obtainable. So we got to know our kids and make sure that we're setting realistic goals that are obtainable or close to obtainable for the child. And if they are kindergarten eligible, objectives are not needed. So if they are, again, I'm going to use that terminology, 3 go 4 is typically our returning kids. We will be adding new goals and we will be adding new objectives. If our kiddos are 4 go 5, okay, kindergarten eligible, we will write the goals for the kindergarten team, but not the objectives, because typically, there'll be an additional meeting and there'll be another opportunity for the school age team to really take those goals and maybe shift them or change them based on, how much growth the child has made since that annual review. Okay, so that was a lot about the report. And this next section is, kind of a branch off of the report, but can be a little bit confusing and overwhelming. So STARS and your child's current IEP runs from September to June. That is our school year. They are with us. Their current IEP is with us from September to June. We then have what we refer to as an extended school year program, okay? What you're looking at right now is the extended school year documentation that would be submitted with your child's annual review report. So extended school year is not guaranteed. And districts have actually gotten stricter as the years have gone on about qualification for extended school year. You have to qualify for extended school year, so our 6-week summer program, based off of what we refer to as regression. So regression means, I'm trying to give you as clear an example as I can. Regression means whenever we go on a break, could be a 3-day break, it could be we're coming up to a 10-day break. Maybe you go on vacation and your child's out of school for 4 days, right? So that's a break from school, a break from program. And your child comes back. We always have a baseline for our kids. In every domain for all of the goals, we have a baseline. And when a child comes back from a break, we're really going to look at their skills based off that initial baseline and look for what we call regression in skill. Okay. So if your child was, I'm going to give you the example right from here. The baseline is Johnny was able to respond correctly to who, what, where, when questions during conversation tasks 80% of the time. Okay. So then Johnny went on a break. He had Thanksgiving break. When Johnny came back, he was able to respond correctly to who, what, where, when questions 50% of the time. So there is your concrete data. Johnny is showing regression after the break based off of on that specific skill. Okay, so the child doesn't have to present regression for every single goal and objective under that domain, but to be able to submit regression data for each domain, the team and or the provider has to see some sort of regression within a skill that is directly linked to their goal or objective. Okay, so we're going to do it again right when we come back from our holiday break. Your kids are going to be again informally assessed, and we're going to take that baseline data that we have for them now, and we're going to be looking for that regression. So then when Johnny's annual review comes up in February, 2 or 3 weeks after we got back from Christmas break, every single person on the team had regression. So we know we are going to submit for Johnny to come for extended school year, because we can tell that when Johnny is on a break from school with his providers, he is regressing in specific skills. So we are going to advocate that Johnny needs to come for summer so that way he can, remain consistent. Summer is not necessarily about, moving towards completion of goals. It's about maintaining skill. So if we are regressing in skill based off of a break, that to us is we want to advocate that Johnny needs extended school year. So like I said, it is not every child gets it. Not every child necessarily needs it. Okay. But we will always do our due diligence based off of data that we take after your child comes back from a break. And then this is what the document looks like that we would submit to the school district with the annual review, or maybe after the annual review, to again ask the committee to consider extended school year for this specific child. Okay, so I probably just hit on all of this. So our extended school year is a 6-week program. Again, it's in the summer, and it is to maintain skills. Not all students will qualify. When qualifying a student, each discipline will determine eligibility separately. So, a child might get speech or special ed speech OT. It's not guaranteed that just because special ed has regression and they're submitting, that speech also has regression and they're submitting. Sometimes our kiddos just get speech over the summer because they showed regression in speech. Sometimes they just get OT over the summer because they showed regression in OT. Sometimes they just get special ed because they showed regression within that domain. And sometimes they get them all because we had documentation that there was regression in all of those domains. So this really is, the qualification is based off of each discipline determining that separately, okay? So qualifications, again, are based off of regression. Like I said, regression means after a break from school, the student has regressed in skills related to their discipline-specific goals. When I say discipline, I'm referring to those domains, that special education, speech and language, occupational therapy, physical therapy, those specific disciplines. So the STARS team members will submit a regression form at the annual review meeting, and then it is really the school district's decision to deem them eligible. So we really are saying, hey, we feel like based off of this data, this child needs to come for summer. Would you consider it? If a student qualifies for ESY, they will not need to re-enroll at STARS. all summer placement letters will be sent out in June, but it will not be a re-enrollment. They're already part of our program, and we are just extending their program with, an updated IEP to reflect the dates of the summer program. Okay. Oh my goodness, that was a mouthful. Okay, let me stop recording.